Hello. I'm just going to jump right in. My name's Mike Merrill, and I'm the world's first publicly traded person. I have some notes over here, so if I'm not looking at my camera, that's why. Um, so I sell shares in myself, and those shares trade on an open market, and my shareholders are able to vote on my life decisions. So important to note that they're not really shares. We call them shares, and it's modeled after a stock market, but they're really, I think they're probably more like vote tokens, and people can have many of them and have different power in how much they vote. Um, I decided when I started this project that there was going to be 100,000 of them, and I've sold just over 14,000 of them to, I think there's also like just over 1,000 shareholders right now. And so they, in addition to voting on my life, they're trading those shares on a market. And it's a market that, I built myself. Well, friends of mine built it and maintain it. We'll get into that in a little later. But I started this in, I think it was early 2008. So it was like before the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper even came out. I think I think that was like the end of 2008 or near the end. And so at the time, like I was modeling it after sort of the regular stock market, and specifically kind of on my experience with TD Ameritrade. That was sort of the initial model of like you deposit funds and then you can buy shares and those kind of things. And so a lot of the format of how KMikeEM works is based on that. It started at $1 a share. And I think today there was actually some trades, and I'm at $5 a share now. So it fluctuates all the time. And then every once in a while, I'll put up a vote when I have a question on kind of what I should do next in my life. There's been 150 plus votes. And obviously people are voting times how many shares. So I think right now the top 10 shareholders hold something like 30% of the voting power. And then there's obviously a long tail for the rest of those 1,000 plus shareholders. Many just hold a single share. And yeah, so I've been doing this for, 10 plus years now. And I thought, in the context of, well, the thing that gets me excited about personal tokens for me is, and Alex is going to talk later. I did a little interview with him where I call him the world's second publicly traded person. And I like the idea that there's kind of this community of other people being publicly traded. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about, what that's like, and, maybe give some advice on anyone who's interested in selling shares in themselves. I think the biggest thing, and something I didn't really realize, is how big of a role sort of investor relations becomes as a publicly traded person. It kind of goes back and forth between, do you want to have a community of people, which is to say these people all interact with one another, or do you want to sort of just broadcast out and kind of a one-to-many relationship? And I kind of think of that as a difference between, is it just an email list, or is it just information out? Or like something I've been trying to do, especially recently, is get more shareholder to shareholder interaction. And that's kind of a more difficult task, but like personally, I find that rewarding. I don't think it's necessarily necessary, I guess. It's also kind of a huge time sink. Having investors requires a lot of time and attention, because you're sort of always trying to maintain interest both in the project itself, and when you have 1,000 people and you send an email out, you're going to get a handful of questions back to answer, and like I'm always keeping an eye on my stock price, and when somebody cashes out, it's kind of a little bit of a emotional blow when somebody decides to sell their shares and leave. And so that's something where it's like I put a lot of time into just constant communication with my shareholders. And then the other thing about investor relations is I try really hard to get and cultivate kind of a diversity of opinion among my shareholders. There's definitely a type of person that is attracted to this project, and I've been trying really hard to make sure that it's not all that we don't all think the same, because I think ultimately in getting people to vote on my choices, I want as many different points of view as possible. So, the next thing is like, how do you keep your price up? And for me, like it really comes down to what is having a share mean? What does it do? Mine's a vote, and so people are voting on decisions in my life that are big and small. Things like I put up for a vote if I should get a vasectomy, and that did not pass. But then I also gave shareholders control over my romantic life and let them choose who I dated. That's kind of like, that creates also a level of sort of accountability and transparency that I've had to do. Like, I think being a publicly traded person also means I'm a very public person. I put most of my life online. You can find a lot of it. I'm pretty open with Q&As, and if I've been lucky to have a little bit of press, and I'll be pretty open with those people. That I think being vulnerable and sharing a lot of that personal stuff is also actually, there's kind of an ROI on vulnerability, is something that I found, is that the more honest my question is that I'm putting to the shareholders, whether it's big or small, and the more I'm actually struggling with something, the more they respond in kind, and ultimately, fingers crossed, raises the stock price. So the downsides, other than sort of the amount of time and energy putting in, is like, it's kind of a dystopian idea to value someone with a little stock ticker, like and obviously, like, fractionalized, like the term ownership is also very problematic. And again, that's a model that I'm using, but it's not, there's no actual ownership. There's no corporate, there's nothing behind it. It's simply a model. So, but there are people that have a real hard time with that. And I understand that. And I'm kind of playing with that a little bit as well, and kind of pushing that sort of dystopian aspect. I get a lot of references. People say that it seems like a Black Mirror episode. The other downside is that there's kind of the social pressure and accountability, which, yeah, I mean, that's a positive and a negative, but I don't feel like I can just leave. I can't just quit, because there's sort of a reputational hit that would happen. I mean, technically I could just, click, shut the site down and go on with my life. But I think I would disappoint a lot of people. And my reputation would suffer, and so I think as people look to kind of launch their tokens, when somebody invests in you, especially invests some money in you, I mean, it's very similar to what Adam was talking about with the Kickstarter. Like, that's your reputation is on the line, and there's some risk there for sure to watch out for. And then probably the weirdest thing is, like, I have a pretty emotional connection with my share price. One of my jobs early on in life was, like, I worked at a publicly traded company where they had the stock price and ticker like in the lobby. And so every day as you walked into work, you'd see what the stock price was. And like the tone of the day was set on whether that was high or low. And it was like, I was like young and didn't care, and I wasn't invested, but other people had like their entire retirement in there. And so it was like a huge deal. And I always kind of laughed and scoffed at it. But now, like, every morning, I check my stock price. Like, I have there's a Alexa skill that somebody built. So I'm just like, when I play my flash briefing, the first thing I get is, this is my price compared to yesterday. And it's kind of a bummer when it's down, like, I was excited this morning. It was up. So that was, it was 485. And I think it was like up to like $5 today. So that was great. So I guess, like, thinking about, like, if I was going to do it again, it's something I was thinking about in terms of this, because, like, the way I set it up, just because of the tools that I had available at the time, it all runs on a website that I control. Like, I'm the company, I'm the market, I'm running all the different parts, right? And the idea that you could not, I'm the custodian of funds, like one person shouldn't be all those things. That's not the best way to do it. And so this idea that now there's this infrastructure out there for the marketplace, for the trading and those kind of things, is pretty exciting. But I would say it's important to kind of start with how you might end it in mind. Like, what, people always ask me the questions like, what happens if I die? And there was actually a vote where I turned my life insurance policy over to the shareholders, though it was designed in such a way that you would only kind of get a partial payout, because I didn't want to create a motive for anyone to murder me. So there's no profit motive in my death. But they get a small payout. And so, that's a risk, in being having a personal token. But if I was doing it again, I like the idea of some of the ways the income share agreements work, where they have a deadline or an end date, or, it'll cover a certain period of time. So I think that's an interesting idea. There's also, if you were doing something around more of a specific venture or trying to accomplish something, like the original sort of corporate charter with the joint venture idea of like, we're going to try to accomplish a thing and then we're going to split up the bounty kind of thing. So that might be a model as well, as if you have a achievable endpoint at which there's a payout. And then, like my end is just, I'm probably just going to do it forever. Like, I don't know how it ends. I was joking the other day about, could my shares become kind of collectibles after I die? And so maybe they actually go up in value, the way that like an artist's work can become more valuable after they die. So yeah, for me, like when I really do think about the end, though, I think about like it has to end in the spirit that it started it in, which for me is very much in these financial markets. And so, I've thought like it'd be great to do a leveraged buyout, like take on a bunch of debt and buy out all my shares. Or I'm definitely not opposed to someone trying a hostile takeover. I'd happily entertain that. Although I guess if I was happily entertaining it, maybe it wouldn't be hostile. Chapter 11 bankruptcy is always kind of is a way a lot of corporations die. And then, there's always like the Enron sort of ending, which is the corruption or scandal or something like that. I could move all of my debts into subsidiaries and see what happens. So, but yeah, I do think that if and when KMIKM ends, it's going to end in some sort of like under financial terms that I'll be kind of exploring and playing with as I have throughout this project. So yeah, and like when I hit the 10-year mark I think that was like 2 years ago, I really was like, am I done? Have I done everything that I need to do with this? And I was like, no, there's still a lot of like interesting things to explore with being kind of modeling a large part of your life after a company and after markets. Like one thing I'd love to add is the ability to short my stock. I think that would be something that if somebody really hated the project, they could still profit from participating, which I like that idea. I've been playing around with this idea for a while of bringing back onion futures, which are not legal in the United States. You're not allowed to trade onion futures, even though you're allowed to trade all these other commodities. So I've been thinking about intentionally committing the financial crime of creating an onion futures market. And then, I do really like the idea of income share agreements. And I think we've seen so much of the interest around that with students and doing debt for college. And I'm like, what does it look like for a 40-year-old man to do it? I think there's something sort of strange about that I find interesting. And then who knows, maybe maybe I can have a Mikey token at some point as well. I don't exactly know what it would do yet, but I'm not opposed to that idea. But when I think about like kind of what's next, it's, like I want to build more kind of community aspects to this project. And the personal token sort of community that's come up, like, I've talked to Alex a few times. I've talked to Bradley over at Roll. I feel like now, like for the first time, I kind of have a community of people that are doing this thing like me. Like, and I've always said I'm the world's first publicly traded person, because I always hoped there would be, more later at some point. So yeah, I think that I'm excited to see people sort of experiment with these different things and experiment with different ways that these things will work, because I think we're very much in an experimentation phase. And it's weird to say that after doing it for like going on 12 years now, but I don't know that we're solving a specific use yet, like, or at least it's not for me, or maybe I'm just like more in a playful experimental place with this project. But yeah, that's my, man, I thought these notes were gonna last a lot longer, and I just tore through them because I get really nervous and talk really fast. But why don't we why don't we open it up for questions?
I can read out the questions for you, Mike.
Sure.
First question is, are you planning to sell organs, and can we have derivative products of those?
I don't think it's legal to sell organs. I allowed my shareholders to choose my political party, which I think, you're not allowed to sell who you vote for, but I was like, well, I can have people help me choose the party at least. But yeah, if it was legal, I'd be open to that. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Is there a difference between the transactional relationship of a shareholder and those who you trust that don't own shares?
It's interesting. So there was a time when someone that I was dating she asked me, about a vote that was up. That was my answer to her was like, oh, you should buy more shares to have more influence, which was not a very good answer. You shouldn't say that to someone that you're dating. But so yeah, there is a difference, obviously. Like my mom doesn't own shares in me. She doesn't think that you should measure how much influence someone has by how much money they've, either given you or bought into the system. And obviously, like that's true. We don't want to see the K-Mikeian model sort of spread out everywhere. I do try to use the sort of, when I have a question that I'm asking friends about, like that's for me is like the thing of like, oh, that's a shareholder question. Like as much as I can talk about it with my friends, ultimately I have to put that up for shareholder vote.
From Lane Redding, have you ever seriously considered shutting the whole thing down? When did you get the closest to doing this, and why did you decide not to?
There was definitely a time. There was a time when I was going through some pretty just like a difficult point in my life. I think it's actually on my site. If you go and you look at the votes, I do these kind of annual. I started doing a approval rating. So it's just a vote that has no meaning, but just says, if you approve of how things are going, vote yes. And if you don't, vote no. And there was one that came in really, really low. And man, it really bummed me out. And people, I was like, I'm open for critique. Let me have it. And people really laid in. And after that, I was just kind of like, yeah, I was a little, I went through kind of a period of being angry about it. There's other stuff going on in my life that wasn't going well. And I was just like, maybe I should just be done. And so that was the time I really considered pulling the plug. And then another time was I was a co-founder of a startup, and we were doing stuff in the kind of security crowdfunding space. And we were just like, man, if this works, if we get this thing off the ground, my background is selling shares of myself is definitely going to become problematic. And we ended up pivoting, and I left that company, so I get to still be publicly traded. But that was another time where I thought, I'm kind of just waiting for, the SEC to knock on my door and say, like, you're not allowed to do what you've been doing for 12 years.
From Brian Plasters, what kind of events cause your token price to fluctuate?
Well, it's not a token, right? It's not anything. It's just an idea of a vote or a share. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen cause the price to fluctuate is press. I mean, as far as increase in price. When there was years ago, there was a Wired article and Atlantic Monthly article that happened about the same time, and I was like, oh, here we go. This is going to be huge. And then, but what was really huge, and I didn't really realize, is I also got on the Today Show. And the power of morning TV that no one watches, in my mind, I'm just like, who watches the Today Show, was amazing. And I hit it high. My share price, I think, hit like $20, $25 a share for a little while. It was insane. I think that was the time too, like a lot of the automation wasn't in. So it was like manually processing orders. And it was, that was pretty crazy.
What is your opinion? Would a personal token fit for funding immigrants, their first year entry costs when he moves from his old country to the new one? What kind of mechanisms are important if such a service existed?
Man, I think you're just getting into such a dystopian territory when you start talking about that kind of thing. Like, I think I don't think there's a one answer fits all. Like obviously, like if someone was able to do it, then as an interesting, kind of like experiment or one off. But I wouldn't want that to be. I guess I wouldn't want that to be like the way it happens. I don't think that we should only allow people to come in or out of a country because we think that they're going to make us money in the future. I think that's a pretty dark view. I think people should be able to move around and not make money. And so that's kind of one of the flaws of this whole system is that we're saying this only works because, or the thing we care about the most is, profitability. That's the only incentive within these systems. And I think that's a dangerous thing that we have to watch out for.
What issue are you most worried about your shareholders voting on?
Actually it's less about them voting and it's more about what aspects I'm sharing of my life. Like I put up a vote for should I do psychedelics, which, like I have done them in the past and it passed. So I'll probably do them in the future. But I also know that like my dad is a shareholder and is on my mailing list. And so like, even as, like a 40-year-old man, I'm worried about like what my dad is going to think about me doing drugs. And so like in that way of like exposing and being vulnerable and sort of saying like, I don't get to piece off these different parts of my life and say, I'm going to talk to you about this stuff and then you about this stuff. I kind of have to go and talk about it totally openly. That's the scariest part of this project.
And why didn't you tokenize yourself yet? You could make a swap stock for tokens.
I think it goes back to like this idea that the people that are participating in the world of crypto, I think are not like many of my shareholders would not be able or be comfortable using that interface. I think it's still a very technical and complicated and not very user-friendly process. I bought some Alex tokens and I found it confusing, and I've been, dabbling and playing with this stuff for a long time. So I think that I like the idea again of not running the market. Like that's not a part that I want to manage. And when there's an error, I have to go and fix it and all these kind of different things. But I do think that like my system also works, and it has worked for longer than, Bitcoin has been around, and so I don't have a strong desire to change it. Now, maybe add on, maybe do something else with tokens. I'm interested and excited about that, but I don't think I need to convert to it.
Alex also adds that you asked your shareholders whether they should like crypto, and they said that they
didn't. No, they said, I asked them what my official opinion on cryptocurrency is, and they chose a kind of like, I'm curious, but a little bit like, don't go crazy, kind of thing. It's like, so it's my official opinion on cryptocurrency was decided by my shareholders. Man, and that 51% attack to sway the vote. I mean, that's the hostile takeover. Like, definitely. I would love to see that. It would make my shareholders rich. I mean, how could I oppose it? If people start coming in and buying a bunch of shares to try to control my life, everyone I know is going to make a lot of money. So that's pretty fun.
Well, thanks for your time up here today, Mike.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
Look forward. Hopefully we'll get some more questions in at the end.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. It's fun to talk about, and it's really fun to hear other people like what they're doing with all of this. I'm super fascinated.
Hey, if I could squeeze a quick one, what's your market cap today, Mike?
It's not the easiest thing to calculate. So, I'm $5 a share, and like I said, there's like just over 14,000 outstanding shares. But then there's also 100,000 shares. Like there was not enough demand when I started to do an IPO. Like I didn't sell a bunch of shares, and so it's a little bit of a like a strange system that was sort of invented by the practical aspects of what I was able to get away with. But let's see if I look up exactly how many shares are outstanding times $5. it's $70,000. So that's not bad. I mean, not bad if someone wants to buy me out. I think I'm worth more than that. I think it's a low number.
Cool. Thank you.